There is always an other to be seen and contemplated and practically loved.
Dream, dream, dream when I feel blue in the night and I need you to hold me tight whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream.
There is always an other to be seen and contemplated and practically loved. And equally, no individual's authentic interest is ultimately dispensable, negotiable, or alienable. And equally, no individual's authentic interest is ultimately dispensable, negotiable, or alienable. There is no scale of value allowing us to make moral defenses for ignoring any particular participant.
Ignore it.
There is no scale of value allowing us to make moral defenses for ignoring any particular participant in this created totality of interwoven attention and building up, which is the effect of the work of divine wisdom.
Hello, hello, baby, I have only got one call. I have been arrested and am in a jail cell. What did you say, God? I hate AT&T. Come on, break me out of here, now can you free me?
Okay. What did you say? Oh, you're breaking up on me. Sorry, I cannot hear you, I'm kinda busy.
Good evening, Rowan. It's the 15th of April 2018 and it's just after 6 p.m. And obviously this is my usual Sunday evening video to reassure you that I haven't been seducing any priests over the weekend. So you can relax. Nor have I been hanging round the Catholic parish of St Urbans hoping to bump into any pretend astrophysicists in order to save your skin. And nor have I come out as a lesbian in order to save your gigantic ego. So everything is exactly the same as usual. Nothing ever changes. Anyway, this evening I thought we could carry on our chat about the Payton lectures, which you gave last week near to the centre of Los Angeles, about 10 miles from the centre of Los Angeles. And you gave one lecture on the 4th and one on the 5th of April, and I'm talking again about the lecture that you gave on the 5th of April, and I'm following on immediately from where I left off in my last video. So, you've just seen a clip of where I left off last time, so I shall dive straight in here to start talking about what you say immediately after that. So you say, hence, it's right to say that rights language in a religious setting is about the sacred, and you're very emphatic when you say about the sacred. And as I said in my last video, you've got your aristocratic accent on, so this is your professor persona. It's the persona you like using most. It's when you're in your element, when you're dictating to other people what reality is and how they should think and what they should do. So, rights language in a religious setting is about the sacred. And hence, too, the notion that the infringement of rights is the ultimate expression of revolt against the sacred. So I guess in the context of what you said previously, I must be revolting against the sacred by ignoring you. That's really hilarious. So you then say, understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power. I don't think that's what the word sacred means, Rowan. I think you're redefining words again, aren't you? Because sacred is more like something that's set aside for religious purposes, that it's treated in a special way and not in the way that ordinary things are treated. So if we're going to call everything sacred, then sacred doesn't have any meaning anymore, does it? Because the whole idea of something being sacred is that it's distinct from ordinary everyday things. It's in a special category, we might say. So if everything's in a special category, then the category isn't special anymore. And as I talked about in my last video, and I shall say some more about this later on in this video, it's not even as if you're designating human beings as being sacred, and this is the reason why they have rights. You're actually talking about every created thing, like inanimate objects and plants and animals as well, which you make more specific later on in this part. So, understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power, that dimension which is, as I've suggested in other places, always outside the scope. So, you're being emphatic again there. That dimension, which, as I've suggested in other places, always outside the scope of any finite individual's grasp or project. That isn't really what sacred means either, is it? But now that you mention it, I'm always outside the scope of your grasp or project. And I really wish you'd get that through your head. So the word sacred, understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power, that dimension which is, as I've suggested in other places, always outside the scope of any finite individual's grasp or project, the dimension in which the other is already related to what is more an other than my own ego. Well, it's really no good making that statement when it's quite obvious from the way that you behave that you do think that everything and everyone is related to your own ego. You live in a fantasy world, you've created a reality, that's a bit of an oxymoron. You've created a fantasy in your head, and other people are merely ciphers, characters in the fantasy world that's going on in your head, and you think it's your job to force them to act in the way that you want. Act out the role that you've already written for them, so to speak. So it's no use saying that other people are already related to what is more than my own ego, because it's obvious that you think everyone is related to your own ego. I've talked about that a lot before. So you then say the recognition of the other person, and you raise your voice an octave there to try and sound authoritative. This is what all your emphatic statements are about, and your aristocratic accent. You're dictating to people how it is, and you're expecting them to believe you because you're using all these techniques of oration in order to convince people of the validity of your argument, because you're not actually able to back it up with any facts, are you? So the recognition of the other person, or the natural feature of the environment. So there you are, then you've equated the human being with the natural feature of the environment. So this is what I was talking about in my last video, that you're trying to make out that there's no distinction between human beings and other created things, plants, animals, inanimate objects, celestial beings, and so on. And this is part of the globalist agenda, designating things other than humans as having rights, primarily the Earth. The Earth has human rights, so to speak. The Earth is sacred, and this is what you're talking about earlier on, other things being sacred. As you said, understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power. And then the recognition of the other person, or the natural feature of the environment, or whatever. The recognition of the other as a creature, a reality, depending on and related to more than my ego and its agenda. That is the primitive generator of any theologically rooted notion of use or right. So you've emphatically stated that things in the environment other than humans have rights, theologically speaking. That's based in the sacredness of created things, according to you. And human beings, or rather should I put that the other way round, what is sacred is inaccessible to human power. So things in the environment, in other words, are inaccessible to human power. This is just complete nonsense. It's not based in Christian theology at all, which teaches that human beings are created in the image of God, in that we're rational, we're able to be altruistic. We don't act simply in accord with animal nature the way that other animals do. We're able to rise above that. This is because we're in the image of God. We have immortal souls. No other created thing has an immortal soul. No created material thing has an immortal soul other than human beings, and we have a unique relationship with the Creator in that we're able to respond to God and develop a relationship with Him. So what you're saying here about everything having rights and everything having rights because it's it or the other things are somehow sacred, it completely contradicts Christian theology. This isn't Christianity. You're making this up. Or rather, you're reading the globalist script. When I say that you're making it up, I mean that you're inventing the idea that all of this nonsense is somehow related to Christianity, that it's part of Christian teaching, and this is the way that Christians should understand the world. So, the recognition of the other person, or the natural feature of the environment or whatever, the recognition of the other as a creature, a reality depending on and related to more than my ego and its agenda, that is the primitive generator of any theologically rooted notion of jus or right. You're using a Latin word there, jus. And this, I think, you go on to say, and this, I think, has a very significant implication for our language about human rights, which is that treating it as a question of law alone misses the point. We touched on this yesterday. So, this makes me laugh because in relation to some other things that you say in this lecture and also the day before, which I haven't covered yet, I think you're saying that putting someone in jail like you for infringing the human rights of other people is missing the point. And then you say after that, we touched on this yesterday, so you're talking about your lecture the previous day in which you're expressing only opinions, really. You're talking about your lecture on the previous day. We touched on this yesterday as if it were revealed truth. I've explained all of this yesterday, you're saying. this is the truth, and now I'm just making or emphasising or elaborating this point more than I did when I was revealing truth to you the day before. This is the kind of thing you're insinuating, I think. And this, I think, has a very significant implication for our language about human rights, which is that treating it as a question of law alone misses the point. We touched on this yesterday. Recognition is a cultural skill or habit and an environment in which right is primarily a legally enforceable entitlement rather than the consequence of cultural acknowledgement will deliver something less than a religiously or even morally sustainable model of right. So I think what you're saying is putting you in jail is not religiously or morally justifiable. You're really funny. So you then say, cultural acknowledgement means the habitual model of seeing or imagining another as occupying a place comparable to your own, and then you look at the camera. So imagining, I think you're referring to John Lennon's Imagine again, which is the anthem of the New World Order. I've put some clips of that in later on so you can see what I mean. Cultural acknowledgement means the habitual mode of seeing or imagining another as occupying a place comparable to your own. So I think you're inviting me to become a globalist puppet just like yourself, which is obviously far more appealing to me than spending eternity in heaven with Christ and the saints. You're so funny. So you then say, yeah, because if I were to become a globalist puppet just like you, then instead of looking forward to spending eternity in heaven with Christ and the saints, I would be looking forward to spending eternity in hell in the arms of Beelzebub, the Prince of Darkness, along with you. So it's not at all appealing, that invitation. Sorry about that. So you then say, not because you've got the same experiences or because you've got the same capacity as another, simply because you share a twofold positioning in relation to the Creator and in relation to the rest of an interwoven system of finite agencies. So I think you're talking about sex again here, aren't you? Twofold positioning. Well, I have offered to kick you in the balls with my steel toe caps, since I know you're into S&M, but so far you haven't taken me up on this generous offer. I just can't understand it. So, you share a twofold positioning in relation to the Creator and in relation to the rest of an interwoven system of finite agencies. You're talking about an interwoven system of intelligence agencies there, aren't you? And you're being puppeteered by intelligence agencies. You're working for MI6, aren't you? So you then say, and I think that this is a potentially significant point in thinking afresh about rights. Ascribing rights to another person or indeed another element in the world. So there you are again, equating persons with other created things, including inanimate objects, and all of this is going towards the earth being sacred, which I talked about in my last video. The earth's sacred, the earth has rights. You can't farm this field, you can't live here, you can't chop down this tree, you can't have any children, you're cluttering up the place and using too many resources, we've got to get rid of you. And that's what this is all about. And you could hardly put it more plainly than here, could you? Ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognising some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. Bestows a title to respect? What, you mean like Archbishop or Lord Williams of Oystermouth? And what about what you were saying, or what your body language was saying in that child abuse inquiry, where you were privileging the abuser over the abused because he was a bishop? Also, when you talk about ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognising some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. So, some decisive aspect of their identity, what you mean like being a human being as opposed to being a heap of rocks. You can't decide that a human being has rights and a pile of rocks doesn't, because then you'd be recognising some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. Is that what you're suggesting as well? I think it is. So human beings have a right to freedom, but some people forfeit that right to freedom by acting in a criminal way and endangering the freedom of other people, and you are one such person. So let's look at this statement again in light of that. Ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognising some decisive aspect of their identity, like being a law-abiding citizen, for example, which bestows a title to respect. So I should be respecting you and not having you put in jail, even though it's not me that's doing that, it's other people. I should be respecting you despite the way that you behave, despite the fact that you're a criminal, a sexual predator, a psychopath, and a terrorist who's provided propaganda that's led to the deaths of millions of people. So I shouldn't be looking for something that I can recognise in you in order to accord you the human right of freedom, like that you're a law-abiding citizen and you're not harming other people. I shouldn't be looking for that in someone. I should just be ascribing rights to people. We should all be ascribing rights to other people, no matter how they behave, and nothing anyone does leads that person to forfeit his or her right to freedom, for example. So it's not religiously or morally justifiable to put you in jail. We've talked about that earlier, and we can't judge you by the qualities of your character and your behaviour, which means that you've forfeited your right to freedom. We can't say that about you. We just have to ascribe you to the right to freedom so that you can go around and ruin other people's lives and have them murdered in globalist wars. And that's the morally and religiously justifiable standpoint. This seems to be what you're saying here. And I would also say on this subject that you don't have rights to access to me in any way whatsoever, because I don't want to have anything to do with you, and in fact no one has the right to have access to me or to be forcing their crap on me when I don't want it and I don't want them. So you just haven't got any rights, Rowan, in relation to anything, and I have the right to discriminate between who I want to be involved with and who I don't, providing that person is agreeable, obviously, or those people are agreeable. So we do discriminate, Rowan. Some people have rights, and some people have forfeited their rights by violating the rights of other people, and you are one such person. And because we're rational beings, we're able to discriminate between the people who still have their rights and those who have forfeited them. I can't talk this evening. Those who have forfeited them, and you have forfeited your right to freedom because you have violated the right to freedom of other people. Try and think about that, and try and think as if you're a rational being and you're not entirely driven by self-interest, and then you will see the logic of this way of thinking. So you actually elaborate on your point further. Ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognising some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. If that were the case, we should be in danger of arguing about which claimants to certain rights had priority over others, according to the degree to which they possessed certain privileged features of humanity. Well, one of the privileged features of humanity is, Rowan, that you haven't been violating the rights of other human beings. So if that were the case, we should be in danger of arguing about which claimants to certain rights had priority over others. Well, some claimants to certain rights do have priority over others. Like, I've got priority over you in claiming the right to freedom and to live my life in peace, and you have no right to claim that right because you have violated my rights. So you have acted in a way, just to over-egg the pudding here and tell you for the millionth time, you have violated the rights of other people, so you have forfeited your right to freedom. And I mean, I don't know what kind of rational person wouldn't be able to understand that. So, you're just trying to get out of jail, aren't you, Rowan? But now no one has the right to put you in jail, even though you have forfeited the right to freedom by knowingly breaking laws, and you know the consequence of breaking those laws is going to jail. So it isn't an arbitrary system that you didn't know anything about. But because you think you've got more rights than other people, you think you're entitled to go around violating the rights of other people, ruining my life, for example, telling all these lies and leading to wars being started, and you've got the right to do all of that, to violate other people's rights, but no one's then got the right to put you in jail to stop you from doing that. So I've got a privileged feature of humanity in that I'm a law-abiding citizen and I'm not violating the rights of other people. You do not have a privileged feature of humanity in that you do violate the rights of other people and you break the law and you damage other people in doing so. So, ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognising some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. If that were the case, we should be in danger of arguing about which claimants to certain rights had priority over others, according to the degree to which they possessed certain privileged features of humanity. And you go on then. No, the foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation, which, because it expresses some dimension of the Creator's self-giving in creation, must be treated primarily as the bearer of that gift from the Creator, a presence in which divine communication is occurring. So, if I let you screw me, that's divine communication. That's what you're saying there, isn't it, Rowan? The divine is communicated to me through your perverted attentions. The foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation. Not with your microscopic floppy thing, surely. You're wanting some action though, aren't you? Another active presence within creation, which, because it expresses some dimension of the Creator's self-giving, so you consider it to be self-giving, don't you, trying to force yourself on me? And of course you're the creator as well, aren't you? Because you've created my identity in your fantasy world, and you're determined to force me to conform to the fantasy persona that you've created for me. So The foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation, which, because it expresses some dimension of the Creator's self-giving in creation, must be treated primarily as the bearer of that gift from the Creator. So this is give it to me, isn't it? Primarily as the bearer of that gift from the Creator, a presence in which divine communication is occurring. I really don't think it is, Rowan. You're in league with the devil, so zip your trousers up and fuck off. I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. So that's the end of my video for today anyway, because obviously I shall be wanting to go to sleep as soon as possible, to be dreaming about my beloved all night long because he's so wonderful and we're made for each other. And we just can't wait to be together on our bed of roses, on our silk sheets, having a really good time in each other's arms, resisting tyrannous authorities. And of course your wife will be doing exactly the same with her hot, sexy Rastafarian boyfriend the minute that you're out of the picture. But don't forget to be alert, because obviously I'll be turning up to make a citizen's arrest for terrorism and to ask you those awkward questions that I still have up my sleeve. And I may even be doing that tomorrow night in London, so watch out. Hasta la próxima.
There is no scale of value allowing us to make moral defences for ignoring any particular participant in this created totality of interwoven attention and building up, which is the effect of the work of divine wisdom. Hence it's right to say that rights language in a religious setting is about the sacred. And hence, too, the notion that the infringement of rights is the ultimate expression of revolt against the sacred. Understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power.
There's nothing left to try. There's no place left to hide. There's no greater power than the power of goodbye.
Understanding the word sacred as designating that dimension or level of created existence which is inaccessible to human power. That dimension which is, as I've suggested in other places, always outside the scope of any finite individual's grasp or project. The dimension in which the other is already related to what is more and other than my own ego.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
That dimension which is, as I've suggested in other places, always outside the scope of any finite individual's grasp or project. The dimension in which the other is already related to what is more and other than my own ego. The recognition of the other person, or the natural feature of the environment or whatever, the recognition of the other as a creature, a reality depending on and related to more than my ego and its agenda, that is the primitive generator of any theologically rooted notion of jus, of right.
I control all your thoughts and all your moves. I'm in the Illuminati. I'm in the Illuminati. I'm in the Illuminati. I'm in the Illuminati.
The recognition of the other person, or the natural feature of the environment or whatever, the recognition of the other as a creature, a reality depending on and related to more than my ego and its agenda, that is the primitive generator of any theologically rooted notion of jus, of right. And this, I think, has a very significant implication for our language about human rights, which is that treating it as a question of law alone misses the point. We touched on this yesterday.
Sentenced her to be taken from this place and brought round to his place.
Objection, my lord. Objection sustained.
You shut up! Objection overruled. The accused then commented on Miss Thang's bodily structure, made several not at all legal remarks on the subject of fun, and then placed his robes over his head and began to emit low moans.
Hello, hello, baby, I have only got one call. I have been arrested and am in a jail cell. What did you say, God? I hate AT&T. Come on, break me out of here, now can you free me?
What did you say? Oh, you're breaking up on me. Sorry, I cannot hear you, I'm kinda busy.
And this, I think, has a very significant implication for our language about human rights, which is that treating it as a question of law alone misses the point. We touched on this yesterday. Recognition is a cultural skill or habit. And an environment in which right is primarily a legally enforceable entitlement rather than the consequence of a cultural acknowledgement will deliver something less than a religiously or even morally sustainable model of rights. And an environment in which right is primarily a legally enforceable entitlement, rather than the consequence of a cultural acknowledgement, will deliver something less than a religiously or even morally sustainable model of rights. Cultural acknowledgement means a habitual mode of seeing or imagining another as occupying a place comparable to your own. Cultural acknowledgement means a habitual mode of seeing or imagining another as occupying a place comparable to your own. Not because you've got the same experiences or even the same capacities as another, simply because you share a twofold positioning.
Oh, some nice boobs, but
The missionary man, he was following me. He said, stop what you're doing, get down upon your knees. I have a message for you that you better believe.
Cultural acknowledgement means a habitual mode of seeing or imagining another as occupying a place comparable to your own. Not because you've got the same experiences or even the same capacities as another, simply because you share a twofold positioning in relation to the Creator and in relation to the rest of an interwoven system of finite agencies.
Why do you resist? We only wish to raise quality of life for all species.
I like my species the way it is.
A narrow vision. You will become one with the Borg. You will all become one with the Borg.
Not because you've got the same experiences or even the same capacities as another, simply because you share a twofold positioning in relation to the Creator and in relation to the rest of an interwoven system of finite agencies. And I think this is a potentially significant point in thinking afresh about rights. Ascribing rights to another person, or indeed another element in the world, isn't about recognizing some decisive aspect of their identity which bestows a title to respect. If that were the case, we should be in danger of arguing about which claimants to certain rights had priority over others, according to the degree to which they possessed certain privileged features of humanity.
I want to be a tree.
If that were the case, we should be in danger of arguing about which claimants to certain rights had priority over others, according to the degree to which they possessed certain privileged features of humanity. No, the foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation.
I want some nice boobs, but
No, the foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation, which, because it expresses some dimension of the Creator's self-giving in creation, must be treated primarily as the bearer of that gift from the Creator.
Give it to me, baby, like boom, boom, boom.
No, the foundational recognition is of another active presence within creation, which, because it expresses some dimension of the Creator's self-giving in creation, must be treated primarily as the bearer of that gift from the Creator, a presence in which divine communication is occurring.
She's got both hands. She's got both hands.
And late that night when the Lord came home, inquiring of his lady, the servant said on every hand, she's gone with the raggle-taggle gypsies,
The footman memorized the number, but the prince still holds both the slippers and usually a price for a bed sit and Canterbury tales. Canterbury tales.
Don't try to change me, you're wasting your time. Now I got something much better in mind. Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian. You bring me alive. He's a bad, bad boy. I'm a bad, bad girl. And we're getting back to
This is why Catholics have the best sex.
Oh, what care I for my house and my land? What care I for my money? Oh, I'd rather have a kiss from the wild gypsy's lips. I'm away with the raggle-taggle gypsy. I'm away with the raggle-taggle gypsy. I'm away with the raggle-taggle gypsy. Oh.